My parents forced me to move back home and pay rent for them and my sister. I refused, and now I am 29 years old. It was not flawless. Our house always had unusual dynamics. My mother thought family devotion required unquestioning obedience, whereas my father had a domineering streak. Though to me, they just felt like chains. They often presented their rules as cultural traditions. I decided to move out upon high school graduation. I leased a small downtown apartment, nothing fancy, just enough room for my thrashed furniture. I started a retail job and worked my way up to a management post. Though not glitzy, I felt good about my independence. Every time I went home for the holidays, I appreciated the freedom I had negotiated for myself. Though not ideal, life was mine. 2 years younger sibling, Jamie, stayed behind. Jamie had always been the sensitive one. Their claimed need for more time to figure things out meant they showed little interest in working or studying. My parents never pushed them too hard. Rather, they puddled Jamie, covering their meal, phone, gas, everything. I first felt sorry for Jamie. I reasoned perhaps they simply needed time to discover their way forward. But it became evident as the years went by. Jamie was happy with the status quo. Early in this year, things changed. My father began phoning me more regularly, his voice forceful and weighty. I first feared something was wrong, perhaps a financial catastrophe or a health worry, but the exchanges usually returned to one theme. "Here it is lonely," he would say. "Jamie is still working things out. We are not getting any younger. Would it be great if we once more shared one roof?" My mother added with her own guilt perspective. "You have always been such a useful daughter. Coming back would mean so lot to us." Suddenly then, I got a text from my dad saying, "We need to have a serious conversation about your future with this fam. Visit on Sunday." The language seemed to be more directive than inviting. Reluctantly, I drove to their house that weekend, attempting to persuade myself it was simply a misinterpretation. Jamie lounged on the couch, hardly recognizing me, while my mum welcomed me with a smile and a tray of cookies when I arrived. My dad never wasted any time. He cleared his throat and added, "We have been thinking when we settled down at the kitchen table, you should go back to your house." I squinted, not sure whether I had heard him exactly. "Go back? What do you imply?" It's simple," my mother interrupted. "We need assistance with expenditures here. Jamie could benefit from some help while they work things out. Everyone would profit if you moved back." I was shocked. This was expectation rather than advice. "You're expecting me to support Jamie, pay rent, pull out my life, and relocate back here?" My dad slanted forward with a strong voice. "You have responsibility. Long enough, you have been living on your own. You ought to consider your family now." "Jamie's been trying so hard," my mother said. "But right now, the job market is tough. They only need a little assistance to get back on their feet." Looking at Jamie, I hoped for some kind of thankfulness or recognition. Rather, they shrugged, staring fixatively at the TV. Deeply breathing, I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I have bills to pay personally. I'm content where I am." My role is not to encourage Jamie. The room's air dropped to cold. The face of my dad clouded. "Your sibling depends on you. We desperately need you. You cannot simply walk away from your family while we are battling." "Struggling?" I asked, shocked. "You own this house," straightforwardly. "Dad, you still have to work. Jamie is an adult who, given effort, is absolutely competent in finding a job. This is about control, not about struggle." My dad's voice grew louder while my mom's face grew stiffer. "We raised you, supported you, and now you pay us back by turning away from your family?" Jamie spoke at last with a laid-back attitude. "It's not a major concern. Should you go back, we can all hang around. If we are together, it is simpler." For me, that represented the tipping point. Too much was their entitlement, the way they behaved as though my life were merely a hassle for them. "No," I answered decisively, getting to my feet. "I'm not returning back. You are not getting paid rent, and I'm not encouraging Jamie's slothfulness. Jamie may begin his search for assistance by looking for a job." My mum seemed ready to cry while my dad's face flushed with wrath. Jamie rolled her eyes just now. Walking out, my dad yelled after me, "We'll talk about this again soon. Family cannot be run away from." But I stopped, tears of resentment stinging my eyes. I drove back to my flat. I had tried to be the good daughter, to keep peace for years, but this was about power and entitlement, not about family. I had no idea, but this was only starting point. Following that terrible conference, I sought to mentally distance myself from the whole experience. I concentrated on job, friends, and the life I had created for me. Still, my folks were not about to let it go that readily. The phones began the very following day. Every evening, my dad insisted on contacting my phone with a fresh dispute. "Arya, you're being self-serving." One night, he said, "You owe us for everything we have done for you." On another, "If you don't help out, Don't expect anything from us in the future, not even inheritance. I laughed bitterly over the inheritance comment. Though I never included that into my plans, his belief that it would scare me revealed how little he knew about me. As always, my mother used a different strategy. She led with guilt, her voice shaking as she detailed Jamie's difficult life. Arya, they are lonely. You are needed for them. As their big sister, you should want to assist. She willfully overlooked the reality that Jamie hadn't even bothered to help himself in years. The worst was when my dad tried to put Jamie on the line on a call. Talk to them, he exhorted. Maybe listening to them may help you grasp. Jamie's voice filtered through, casual and contemptuous. Hey, everyone would just find it simpler if you returned. We can hang about or whatever. The entitlement streaming from their voice astounded me. Jamie, you're 27, I responded, attempting to control my resentment. You could be able to work. Why, in your opinion, should I be supporting you? They groaned. The employment market is terrible. You wouldn't know. You have always had it easy. That line stood strong. Simple. From part-time jobs to a solid profession, I had toiled for everything I had. I had been climbing. Jamie had flown through life, depending entirely on our parents. I hung up before the discussion got hot. I visited my best friend, Mia, that week and blurted everything out over tea in her little living room. I said, the irritation boiling behind every word. They want me to move back, pay them rent, and support Jamie. Mia scumbled. Why do they absolutely need your money so badly? Are their financial circumstances challenging? Very. I gave my head a shake. No. They're not broken. My dad still works a respectable job. The house is paid off. They simply believe that since they raised me, it is my responsibility to help. And lately, they also want me to carry Jamie. Mia slanted back, her brow wrinkled. Do you believe that if you stick to your position, they will retreat? Very, I pouted. I don't believe it. They have always thought of me as owing something. Should I cave in now? It will never cease. And I was correct as well. My mother phoned once more a few days later, this time asking me to a family gathering at their residence. She said, her voice gentle but firm, we need to talk this out face to face. Though part of me wanted to believe they were ready to listen, my gut told me it was a trap. I so agreed grudgingly. The vibe was tense when I got there. Jamie was stretched on the couch scrolling on their phone as my parents sat at the kitchen table. My dad was direct after some forced small chat. We have decided you will return next month, he declared. We'll work out the rent details later. You'll pay us straightforward and help Jamie with his costs. Heart pumping, I fixed my gaze on his. You have made decisions? I asked again, my voice tinged with incredulity. My mother nodded as though this was the most sensible course of action available worldwide. Dear, it's what everyone would prefer most. Jamie has been looking for a job, but the market is challenging. We cannot carry the weight by ourselves. I glanced to Jamie, still fixed to their phone. Have you actually been searching for work? They waved their shoulders. Kind of. That shrug set off a fire. Kind of. I took a quick picture. You're not even trying. Yet you expect me to pull apart my life and pay your bills? This is ridiculous. The redness of my dad's face came from wrath. Rising in voice, he said, you're being disrespectful. We raised you, gave you everything, and today you're turning away from us. My mother added in, her voice kind yet forceful. Family gives up something for each other, Arya. That is the way things go. Sacrifice. Rising to my feet, I said, this is manipulation. It is not sacrifice. Jamie should first take ownership of his own life if he seeks assistance. I am not paying you $1, and I am not moving back. The room went crazy. Jamie rolled their eyes and said something about how I was too proud, while my mum started weeping and my dad yelled about devotion and respect. I left slamming the door behind me. I experienced an unusual mix of guilt and relief as I drove home. I had stood up for the first time, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. Indeed, the following week, my parents changed their strategy to become stricter. My mum trailed behind my dad, who showed up at my flat unannounced. They pounded so loudly it sounded like a police raid. They marched in without waiting for an invitation when I opened the door, their gaze looking about my living room as if they were looking for proof of excess. We have discussed with the rest of the family, my dad declared. They all agree. You ought to be supporting us. With thin patience, I crossed my arms. I have no interest in what other family believe, not their life. This is Ma with a sharp look. My mother folded her arms. We are not leaving unless you guarantee a return. Arya, you owe this to us. Again, that line. You owe us. I inhaled deeply, my resentment seething just under the surface. Get out. I pointed to the door. The pupils of my dad became wider. Exchange me, I said. Get out. Again, in a forceful voice, I am not going back. You are not getting paid rent. And I'm not endorsing Jamie's sloppiness. Now get off. They stomped off, throwing charges of treachery with each step. My heart beating, I fell on the couch when the door closed tightly behind them. Though little, it felt like a major triumph. The phone calls resumed that evening from extended relatives. Not wasting any time fabricating a sob tale about how I was deserting my family, my dad had. Some cousins chastised me, wondering how I could be so callous. Others called for quiet support after seeing through the lies. Jamie's worst message, though, came from her. "You're making everyone's life tough here. Just follow their instructions." I blocked their phone number. The next days were a flurry of accusations, guilt trips, and more intense manipulation. The campaign of my parents against me went like wildfire through our extended family. Calls and texts from aunts, uncles, even cousins I hadn't heard in years, started to flood in. Most of them memorized the same sentences my parents had taught them. "Arya, your parents brought you up. Help them in their old age, the least you can do. Jamie is struggling. How could you be so selfish? You lost your roots." Fortunately, some families saw through the drama. Among the first to phone and offer her encouragement was my cousin, Maya. "Your dad called me," she remarked with a doubtful voice. "He's giving the impression that you live some opulent life while they barely make ends meet." "That is true," I grumbled angrily. "Not even close. Working hard makes my life comfortable. I'm not rolling in money here, and they're good. My dad still has a decent career, and they own their house outright. They merely believe I owe them my life and income." Maja exhaled. "That's what I assumed. Arya, you are acting moral here. Let 'em shame you into nothing." Her comments were like a lifeline. A few days later, events developed in an unexpected manner. My father properly typed and signed a letter I got in the mail. It was loaded with official jargon on family obligations and insisted that I return within 2 weeks or risk legal action for unpaid family dues. Sitting there, I stared at the letter, a mixture of incredulity and resentment flooding over me. Although unpaid family dues are not a concept in the United States, the sheer boldness of the threat made me silent. It was a fear tactic, rather basic. That evening, I gave a friend of mine, Liam, a legal advisor, a call. I forwarded the letter after outlining the circumstances. He phoned me back practically right away. "Arya, this is nonsensical," he said. "There is no legal foundation for their assertions, but you should record everything, texts, calls, this letter, just in case they try to escalate more. Should they continue to harass you, you may be entitled to a cease and desist or perhaps a harassment lawsuit." Hearing those words gave me a sensation of power, not like anything else. For years, the control of my parents had been emotional, ethereal. Thanks to Liam's guidance, I knew how to object now. I resolved to write a formal cease and desist letter via a lawyer the next week. It was evident from its succinct and professional manner that I would not put up with more harassing or unfounded threats. Writing the letter seemed like recovering my autonomy, like establishing a barrier whose crossing would result in consequences. The damage started right away when my parents got the letter. Text messages and furious voicemails helped my dad to express his wrath. "You're unappreciative," he yelled in one message. "You turn around and stab us in the back after everything we have done for you. To us? Arya, you are dead." I could not overlook the irony. Just a few weeks earlier, he had been urging me to move back in. I was the evil right now. I didn't reply. Rather, I kept every message and voicemail and compiled them into an increasing file of proof. Maya, my cousin, got in touch once again around this period. "You're not going to believe this," she continued. "Your dad borrowed $1,000 from me a few years ago and never paid it back. I now learned they want you to help Jamie pay for his life. Arya, there is a trend here. Don't give in." Hearing that validated my already suspected observations. My parents were just entitled. They were not having financial difficulties. From me, Jamie, even extended family, they felt the world owed them something. Meyer's support drove me to decide to go one step farther. I gathered every bit of data I had, the books, the voicemails, a fake letter from my dad, and even screenshots of the entitled messages from my sibling. Then I emailed a small set of relatives. Ones I knew were either unsure or had been deceived by my parents. The email was factual and cool. I attached all the proof, went over the circumstances, and set out the series of events. I wanted to clear the record, not to shame my parents. The answer was simply too much. Apologizing for leaping to conclusions, certain relatives who had earlier chastised me, others who had guessed my parents' actions all along, extended encouraging remarks. But my parents were rather angry. Though the proof was indisputable, they sought to twist my email as a slanderous act. Direct calls from family members challenging their actions and motivations began to come in. Jamie also suffered criticism. Once-off relatives who had given them money or a place to stay started cutting them off. Understanding their struggles were mostly self-inflicted, I sensed my advantage for the first time in years. The silence that followed turned out to be gift. I stepped back. No more calls demanding. No more guilt trips or manipulative strategies. A voicemail from my dad represented the last-ditch effort of my parents. "You've destroyed this family, Ari," he murmured. His voice weighed with resentment. "I hope your alone time makes you happy." Still, I was not alone myself. Along with friends and loving family like Maya, most importantly, I had a life I had created for myself. I got used to the silence in the next weeks. My parents no more constantly calling. Messages requesting I give my life to help Jamie no longer. I thought I could breathe for the first time in years. Of course, the silence did not indicate they had given up totally. My dad tried one last ditch to turn extended family against me. A couple relatives sent me Facebook screenshots of a post he created. This was a theatrical self-pitying speech about how I had abandoned my family and turned away from supporting them through their hour of need. He presented himself as the honorable parent who had given all for a thankless child. Had the email I sent previously not been included, the post might have worked. Many of the families who watched it answered publicly, challenging his account of events. One aunt asked, "Why were you demanding money from Arya if she is so unappreciative?" Another relative added, Funny how this is struggling families owns their house outright and has steady income, but still wants their daughter to pay rent and support her sibling. She is not accountable for Jamie's decisions." Strangely fulfilling was seeing the story fall apart from a distance. For so long, my parents had depended on guilt and deception. They were not sure how to respond to being called out. Jamie, meanwhile, said nothing at all. Perhaps they at last understood the well had run empty. Maya, my cousin, sent a note one morning. She advised you should come visit. Get out of the city for a bit and clear your head. I exactly needed this. After packing, I traveled to her house, a few hours away in a small, lovely town. We caught up, hiked, and discussed all that had transpired throughout the weekend. Maya, always direct. Let go without thinking twice. "You know, Arya, it's not just about them wanting your money," she added, as we sat on her porch with a lake in front of it. "It comes down to control. They despise their inability to control your life as you are living it right now," nodding as I drank my coffee. "You are correct in my opinion. Jamie never sought to separate. Hence, they never pushed him the way they pushed me. They were happy to live under the control of my parents." "Exactly," Maja answered. "Still, you are more robust than that. You created your own life and they find unacceptable. That is the reason they are lashing out." Her remarks really speak to me. I had seen myself for so long as the one not doing enough, the one causing trouble, but today I understood that was untrue. The irrational expectations of my parents did not weigh on me. Their reluctance to let go did not bother me either. I was lighter and more at peace when I got home. I had chosen to cut off all communication with Jamie and my parents. I told the few relatives still serving as messengers that I was not interested in hearing any further information, banned their numbers, disregarded emails. The choice felt extreme at first, but over time it grew freeing. I could concentrate on my own life without their voices playing in my ear nonstop. I pushed myself into my work, signed up for yoga lessons, and even founded a book club. My life seemed to really fit me for the first time in years. Months later I learned via the grapevine that my dad had stopped talking about me totally. Whether it was out of embarrassment or tiredness, I knew nothing and had no interest. Jamie was still living at home, presumably annoyed that my parents were not providing the same financial assistance he had once insisted upon from me. I could not lose the irony in it. Maya checked in to see how I was doing, and sent me brief reports on family strife on a regular basis. She teased one day, "I think you scared them. They are not used to someone confronting them." "Good," answered. "Perhaps they will hesitate before attempting to control another person." Looking back, I am not sorry about the decisions I took. Although it was difficult, cutting off my parents and Jamie was really vital. Family is about mutual respect and support, not about obligation, I have discovered. Walking away is survival when those things are absent rather than betrayal. When I consider my future now, it seems clear and free from their expectations. I am my own hero. I am not theirs. And that, in my opinion, is the ultimate sort of retribution available. Story 2. It's been 2 weeks since my 19th birthday, and I'm still reeling from the whole ordeal. My grandparents, bless their hearts, gifted me a trip to Rome. Like the whole shebang, plane tickets, a fat check for expenses, the works. They handed me this beautiful envelope with the tickets inside, and I swear I almost cry. Rome, the city I'd dreamt of since I was a kid, finally within reach. But then my parents started in. They thought it would be better if the trip went to my older sister, Amelia. She's 23, the golden child, the one who can do no wrong. Apparently, since she's studying architecture, Rome would be this amazing opportunity for her to see all the famous buildings and whatnot. I tried to reason with them. I'm planning to major in history, and Rome is, kind of a big deal historically. Plus, Amelia had the same opportunity when she turned 18. My grandparents offered her the exact same trip, but she just took the money instead. Now it was my trip, and I wasn't about to let it go. But the airline won't let us transfer the tickets, I argue. It's against their policy. My parents just waved it off like it was some minor inconvenience they could easily fix. Don't worry about that, Anya. We'll figure it out. Yeah, figure it out. Code for wear you down until you cave. The arguments went on for days. It was exhausting. They started with the whole Amelia needs this for her resume spiel, then moved on to the you have plenty of time to travel later line. Finally, they hit me with the we don't want this to go to waste bit. That one stung. It was like they were saying I wasn't good enough, that I wouldn't appreciate it the way Amelia I finally broke, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't take the fighting any. I told them to do whatever they wanted with the ticket. I just wanted some peace. At least I still had the check, right? Some small consolation. I mean, I'm used to this kind of treatment. Being the less favored child has its perks, like rock-bottom expectations and a healthy dose of cynicism. But here's the kicker. They actually managed to get the ticket transferred. I don't know how because the airline's policy was pretty clear, but somehow they pulled it off. Yesterday, the day I was supposed to be flying to Rome, Amelia took my boarding pass and headed to the airport. A few hours later, we got a call from the police. Turns out, Amelia had been in an accident. On the way to the airport, she decided to grab the steering wheel from the taxi driver because she thought he was taking the wrong route. Yeah, you read that right. She thought she knew better than the guy who drives around the city for a living. The car crashed. Amelia walked away with a few scratches, but the taxi driver was seriously injured. Broken arm, huge gash on his forehead, the whole 9 yards. And now he's pressing charges. My parents are freaking out. They're going to have to drain their savings to settle with the driver and keep Amelia out of court. When I heard all this, I just snapped. This is karma, I blurted out. This is what you get for stealing my trip. Yeah, probably not the most sensitive thing to say, but I wasn't exactly thinking clearly. My parents were horrified. Anya, how could you say that? Your sister could have been killed. I tried to apologize, but the damage was done. They called me selfish, insensitive, all the usual things. It was infuriating. They were the ones who were selfish. They were the ones who stole my dream trip and gave it to their precious Amelia. But they weren't listening. They just stormed out, heading to the hospital to check on Amelia. And that's when it hit me. Why was I putting up with this? Why was I constantly sacrificing my own happiness for a family that clearly didn't value? Screw it, I thought. If they're going to hate me anyway, I might as well give them a good reason. My blood was boiling, like a pot of water left on the stove too long, bubbling over with anger and resentment. I grabbed a taxi and told the driver to take me to the hospital. On the way, I made a decision, a big one. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. I had my grandparents' check, I had my passport, and I had a burning desire to get the hell out of there. When I got to the hospital, I found my parents and Amelia on the same floor where the taxi driver